I have to assume that if you've clicked on this YouTube video, you already know something about the Fawn Lodge, or perhaps have driven by it during a visit to Big Bear Lake. This is the second part of a 5-part series on the history of this great building. To make the most sense out of this presentation, I would suggest that you start by watching the first part. You will be able to find that first part by typing in Fawn Lodge History Presentation Part 1, the early years, in the YouTube search bar. Chris Cook, a local Big Bear Lake historian, provided this photograph. It most likely is the earliest photograph of the Fawn Lodge when it was operating under the name of the Tea Room. The real estate development firm of Waybright and Thompson were using this building as a recreational hall and business owner in the 1920s. The large second floor of the building was used as a night spot. There was a large stage big enough for a 9-piece orchestra, dining tables, and dance floor. There were large parties held at the tea room. In the 1920s, there were no closing times imposed on dance halls, so many of the parties went on until dawn. Although the sale of liquor was illegal, many people brought their own liquor. Finding a drink was never a problem. More of that time period can be found in Anne Rourke's book, When Big Bear Was Wild and Woolly, Volume 4. Here are 2 photographs of the Fawn Lodge. The photograph on the left shows the building when it was first constructed in 1925 with the high dome. At that time, the building was as tall as being a 4 or 5 stories high. The photograph on the right is dated 1937, and it is the earliest photograph showing the building without the dome. So, between 1925 and 1937, the dome was removed. There is one theory that the dome might have been lost in a fire. In 2023, I was able to tour the inside of the Fawn Lodge, and I did not see any remaining evidence of a fire. If there was a fire, it would most likely have burned down the entire building. There are no newspaper articles on a fire or this dome being removed. Possibly the snowstorm of 1932 could have collapsed the dome, and the owners rebuilt it to its current configuration. We will never know the reason for the dome and why it was removed. Like the Dark Ages of Europe, we know very little about the Guio Building in the 1930s. There are no newspaper articles or ads that can be found. The building was owned by Michael and Mattie Ryder, who were real estate investors. There is no evidence that there were any businesses that were located in the building at that time. We do have this photograph from Mark Durbin, but there's no date assigned to this photograph. The caption has it identified as Lounge Fawn Lodge. This photographed area would later house the cafe and then later on again the House of Wilson restaurant. Note the white columns that are in the picture. They were used to hold the massive structure that was previously pictured. Note the ceiling. It had copper-peened panels which were in style during that time period. The fireplace is the same as it is today. Here is a newspaper article quoting Peter Holt, who owned the building in 1941. Contrary to Holt's statement, the building did not fall into foreclosure. San Bernardino tax assessor records show that it was owned by Michael and Mattie Reeder. From searching newspaper.com articles, the Reeders were investing in real estate all over Southern California. There is no information on what the Reeders were going to do with the property from 1949 to 1941. The building may have sat empty during those years. From 1941 to 1944, the lodge was owned by Peter Holt, who sold it to 3 men under the company name of Fawn Lodge Incorporated. This company was owned by Glenn Wilson, Ray Shoup, and Ray Gaskell. Here is their story. This is the first mention of the building being called the Fawn Lodge. The ad was run by Peter Holt, who was the owner of the building as of March 3, 1941. He must have been looking to have someone else run the cafe restaurant at that time, according to this article. This Frasher photograph was located at the Pomona Library. Burton Frasher made a business traveling around Southern California, photographing local scenes and businesses. He would then offer mass-produced postcard images for businesses to sell to their stores and camps. The photograph never made it into the official Frasher postcard stock inventory. Thankfully, Frasher indexed his photographs with a number that was date-related. From this index, we know that F2986 was taken on July 9, 1941. This is soon after Peter Holt purchased the property. Let's take a closer look at the front section of the building and the front door area. The left side of the cropped photograph shows the corner store was boarded up with what looks to be plywood panels. On the right side, there is a sign above the front door that identifies the building as the Fawn Lodge. All the windows on the second story appear to have curtains on them. Possibly this might have been the opening day of the Fawn Lodge when Peter Holt owned the property. These two photographs are enlargements from the slide previously shown. The Fawn Lodge sign, particularly the one on the right, shows that there was a dining room that was part of the lodge. In this undated photograph of the lodge, there is a flagpole in the front of the building and the cafe sign on the corner. This is interesting since the plumbing for the kitchen is currently located at the opposite end of the building in the back. The flagpole may have been significant as marking the location of a San Bernardino County free library. In the first underlined section of the Grizzly article, we learned that the fireplace is in the lounge part of the lodge. This matches the layout that was previously shown in Mark Durbin's photograph. Later on, in the Wilson years, we will see that the fireplace is part of the cafe or restaurant. So, at this time period, this gives evidence that the restaurant part of the building may have been located somewhere else other than the far right section of the building. In the second underlined section, we learned that the lodge not only had a drugstore and souvenir shop, but it also did in fact house the county free library. The article on the top of this slide is from the August 18, 1944 edition of the Big Bear Grizzly. It informs us that a canopy and awning were added by Peter Holt. So this information helps out in identifying a time frame for any of the photographs of the Fawn Lodge. The bottom photograph is a cropped section of a Frasher postcard from July 1946, showing the canopy and awning. Note the cafe is now located on the far right of the building. In this Big Bear Grizzly ad from April 27, 1945, Peter Holt is advertising the Fawn Lodge as having a cafe, drugstore, and gift shop. It was soon after this ad appeared that Peter and his wife Helen sold the Fawn Lodge property to the Fawn Lodge Incorporated, which was owned by Glenn Wilson, Ray Shoup, and Ray Gaskell. Peter and Helen Holt went on to build a drugstore right next door to the lodge, which is now housed by the Gold Pan restaurant. Helen Holt was a practicing pharmacist and ran the drugstore for several years. In this Frasher postcard, which can only be identified as being from 1946, we see that the side of the building still has the original bark covering on the outside timbers. The corner store is being used as a hardware store at this time. In this Frasher postcard from July of 1949, we see the awning, canopy, and bark side timbers, and a flagpole but now the addition of Harvey's Liquor Store and a bait and tackle store appear. Looks like business was picking up. In any event, the businesses did come and go. This concludes part 2 of the history of the Fawn Lodge. The third part of this series can be found on YouTube by searching under the title of Fawn Lodge History Presentation Part 3. If you enjoyed this presentation and want to know more about Big Bear history, come join us at the Big Bear Valley Museum at 800 Greenway Drive, Big Bear City. We are located just east of the airport and open every Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. during the Memorial Day weekend to the Labor Day weekend. Hope to see you there.